we are out of the theology of what can and can't be studied, right? That's gone. That's not the topic of Tractate Chagiga, and it's not the topic of Chapter 2 of Tractate Chagiga. The topic is supposed to be the Chag, the sacrifice that was made on Chagim. So whenever you came to one of the three pilgrimage holidays, which are Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, you had to bring a particular single animal that was the sacrifice for the Yom Tov. And they're going to have all kinds of conversations. This is the one about when you bring it up to the priest, do you place your excuse me, do you place your hands on the head of the animal in proclaiming what the purpose of the animal is or not? Now, I'm going to go to Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, and you may recognize some of these people. Historically, where does rabbinical Judaism come from? In Pirkei Avot, chapter 1, we have Moses received Torah from Sinai, gave it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets to the men of the great assembly. Now, in rabbinic historical timelines, and we know that the Talmudic understanding of the actual scientific, for lack of a better word, timeline going back falls apart well before the beginning of the Second Temple. They don't actually have the correct dates according to archaeology and sources from outside of Judaism for when certain things were, when certain things happened. So it's a little malleable, or it's a little gray. Come on in, have a seat. Ron, would you give her a text and let her know where we are? So the men of the Great Assembly are established by Ezra in rabbinic understanding, which means in Talmudic understanding. So when Ezra and Nehemiah go back to the land of Israel in about the year, for lack of a better date, 500 or 540 before the Common Era. So the end of the 6th century. So the first temple is destroyed in 586. 40 years or so later, Ezra and Nehemiah are bringing people back to the land of Israel. That would have been the time that the men of the Great Assembly were established as a Sanhedrin over the people of Israel. So Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe, is the one who brings Torah texts as law back to the land and establishes the authority, the seat of law, known as the men of the Great Assembly. The men of the Great Assembly, according to Pirkei Avot, they said three things: be deliberate in judgment, raise up many disciples, and make a fence for the Torah. So we have to figure out what year is it that is happening, right? Were there always rabbis? So in the Talmudic imagination, you're going to go all the way back to the time of Ezra, and there are, for lack of a better word, rabbis. I'm smelling the floor curing still, right? Yeah. So I'm starting to sneeze and I'm starting to wheeze. So if I turn blue, let's go somewhere else. I'm not allergic, I'm asthmatic. So that's fun. We're having all kinds of fun here getting this class rolling today.
Where was Ezra coming from?
He was coming from Babylonia. So what happened is in the year 722 before the Common Era, 2,800 years ago, roughly, there was a kingdom that ran from Turkey to Iraq called Assyria. And Assyria conquered the northern half of Israel. They don't conquer the southern half of Israel. They fail in their attempt to destroy Jerusalem. They don't conquer the southern half of Israel. That empire, Assyria, gets conquered by the Babylonians, farther to their east, Iraq and the Medes. So that conquers Assyria, and therefore gets control of all of their lands. They have the same problem with the Jews that Assyria had. I mean, we haven't changed. We're annoying, right? Nobody likes to try and rule over us because we're ungovernable, right? So the Babylonians try and exercise control over us, and we rebel against them as well. There's a series of invasions and so forth. One of our kings gets dragged off in chains. He gets returned. Ultimately, in 586, enough is enough. The Babylonians destroy Jerusalem. They burn the first temple down to the ground. They take our leadership and our priests off in exile off to Babylonia, along with our nobles and our most wealthy, powerful people, so that nobody but the farmers and the scattered people are left in the land. And so our people are now in Babylonia. In Babylonia, prophecy continues. The prophet Jeremiah is functioning there. The prophet Ezekiel is functioning there. Second Isaiah is functioning there. So we have still a relationship with God, but no temple and no land. So it's a theology of destruction and a theology of return. We have to return. By about the year 540 before the Common Era, 2,500 plus years ago, Persia, further to the east, it's like one of those diagrams of a little fish getting eaten by a bigger fish, getting eaten by a bigger fish. Assyria gets eaten by Babylonia. Babylonia gets eaten by Persia. Persia conquers that entire area and sets up the largest and most successful empire in the history of mankind up until our day. There was a time that the Empire of Persia ruled over 80% of the human beings on the face of the planet.
What about Rome?
Rome doesn't exist yet. This is way before Rome.
Oh.
Long before Rome, long before Alexander the Great, long before Athens, long before Plato, right? Nothing in Europe matters at this point. People are painting themselves blue and hiding in caves in England. There's no real widespread civilization. The Vikings are off running around marauding. Okay? So there's civilization in the rest of the world. And the Persians take over Babylonia, and Cyrus of Persia says, you Jews living in Babylonia, you can go back to the land of Israel, you can rebuild your temple, you have my blessing, more important, you have my money, that I will help set you up and put you back into your land. The person who leads that effort to go back to the land of Israel is named Ezra. And another guy named Nehemiah.
Why would Persia do that?
Why would Persia do that? Because geopolitically, they have conquered Babylonia. Babylonia had conquered all these faraway countries who resented Babylonia. Persia becomes their savior, and if they send them back to the edges of their empire and resettle them and arm them and give them money, then all the edges of their empire will be led by people who are grateful to Persia. And as a matter of geopolitics, it's just like setting up the buffer states in Europe after World War II. You have countries that are loyal to you that are between you and the real enemy. The next empire is Egypt. So by setting Israel up as a nation, although it wasn't Israel, it was called Judah, because only the southern kingdom had gone into exile, so that's Judah, and the only people who come back are the people who survived from Judah, so their religion becomes known from that time on as Judaism. So our name Judaism comes from that moment in time.
Benjamin's portion was
They're gone. We don't really hear anything about Benjamin anymore. They're in the kingdom of Judah, but they don't have a separate identity ever again. So Judaism is in the land of Judah when Cyrus of Persia puts our people under Ezra back there then, by the year 500. They start building the second temple. It doesn't go well. All kinds of stories that you can read in the book of Ezra about what went wrong and what they tried to do about it. It's a very interesting historical book. But the bottom line, how did we get onto this track? the bottom line is the men of the Great Assembly, according to 1,000 years later, the Talmudic history says the men of the Great Assembly were established by Ezra and Nehemiah. The Mishnah is working according to that same sense of timeline, that way back at the time of the return of Ezra is when what we call Rabbinic Judaism was empowered in the land, right? That there are institutions and legacies of Torah scholarship and authority that they trace back their ancestry of the rabbinic system, they'll trace back to men of the Great Assembly. That may be speculative as a matter of history. Whether or not there was a Great Assembly under Ezra is not clear, and whether or not they are the forefathers intellectually of the rabbinic movement is also not clear. So there might have been something, and the rabbis are the ones claiming descendancy from it. So there's two ifs there, okay? But there's no harm in believing it, and there must have been something or the Mishnah couldn't have talked about it. And there must have been some sense of connectedness, or the Mishnah wouldn't have talked about it. So there's something there, but historically not entirely clear. Okay, so what happens? We know that after Ezra and Nehemiah, there's no king in Israel. Ezra is not a king, and he's not a prophet. That's why they call him a scribe. Why is there no king when the second temple gets built? Why don't we put the line of David back on the throne?
Because the second temple was not built by the Jews, it was built by the emperor.
Okay, and therefore?
And therefore, the emperor wasn't welcoming a king.
Right. If you put a king on the throne in Jerusalem, it's rebellion against Cyrus of Persia, who in his graciousness and his power, ruling over 80% of the humans on the planet, has allowed you to rebuild this temple. You have a choice as far as practical Machiavellian politics. You can take his money, build a temple, and not have a king, or you can lose his money, not have the money to build a temple, have a king, and make him angry. It's really not much of a choice.
Do the Kohen Agadol have a lot of power then? Because it's like, or just maybe.
No,
they're not
that
political.
there is in the books of exile prophecy that the Tzadokite priest line from Pinchas's line will become the specific high priestly line moving forward. That seems to be a centralization of priestly power for high priesthood in a particular priestly family that were the leaders of this Ezra return. So they have power, and in as much as the tithe system will pay into them 1/10 of everybody's stuff, and they will have the ability to orchestrate the rituals and all that kind of stuff, but the high priest is not a political ruler. He can't collect taxes, he can't wage war, and when he steps off the Temple Mount, he's got nothing to do, because in Ezra and Nehemiah's day, the centralization of worship into the one temple in Jerusalem is the whole point of the return to the land. So the downside of that for the high priest is he's really important there, but outside of that little moment in time, there's nowhere where he has anything to do anymore, right? So not really. Now, let's fast forward. When do we put a king on the throne?
After the temple of Solomon.
Yeah, so
No, the second
first temple of Solomon has long been destroyed. We went into exile, we returned. We built a second temple without a king. But later on, we wind up with a king. So Persia falls. Who conquers Persia? Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great conquers Persia. And when he conquers Persia, he also conquers Media. So he conquers everything that's Shushan and Iraq and Kuwait, and Egypt's another story. Going to the east, all the way to Iran. He doesn't occupy Iran, but in battle west of Iran, he destroys the army and conquers the leaders of the Persian Empire, and he becomes the ruler of the Persian Empire. The problem is he dies
Young.
before he comes home. So he wins these battles out there, but he never comes home and consolidates his power as the ruler of the empire. He dies out there.
What's the time frame of that? What we're talking about? More or less?
340 before?
So it's a lot later.
360 before. So 200 years after Ezra, 200 years of Persia ruling the world, ends with Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great bypasses Israel completely. Contrary to the Midrashim, where he comes in and proclaims the beauty of the city, and everyone is so grateful to him and his wisdom that they start naming all their kids Alex. Contrary to the Midrash, Alexander the Great never set foot in the land of Israel, nor in the city of Jerusalem. As a matter of history, it's just not true. Okay? But he does give us a pass, which is plenty of a good reason for us to feel grateful towards him. And inasmuch as he takes off the yoke of the empire, he gives us freedom. So let me get this straight. You took away the kingdom that we've been owing allegiance and taxes to. You took away the empire and the emperors who have been ruling over us, stopping us from ever hoping to have Davidic kingdom. And by the way, you don't stop by as long as we pay the rent. Right? I can do anything I want here now. And we get a period of relative freedom, except for later, the next level of Greeks and so forth. Really, they like this land, they take over the whole eastern Mediterranean, and then you get Antiochus and Hanukkah, right? So the Greek civilization takes over the area, but not through war. It just through acculturation and economics and time. When is Hanukkah?
December by
130s, 160s before the Common Era. So we've got 200 years of Hellenist civilization, Greek civilization. All right? So Ezra builds the Second Temple in 540. It's not a great success. It's a schlumpy little building up there. It's underfunded and there's a lot of corruption. Just read the prophets, they'll tell you. Right? And then after that, the bankroll for that system, which was Cyrus and Darius and Xerxes and so forth, falls apart. And they don't have external funding so much anymore, and it's probably just kind of limping along. Greek civilization comes, we gain freedom but acculturation, and then the local Jews don't like, there's a civil war against Greek culture, and the temple has fallen into shady control by Greeks who have put a sculpture up in it and stuff like that, and the Hasmonean dynasty is established through the military religious revolution of the Maccabees. The Maccabees take over the land and enforce Torah law at the point of the sword, purify the temple, and reestablish the sacrifices in the priesthood, and set upon the throne a Hasmonean king. That's our first king since the destruction of the first temple, 400 years before. Okay? So there's a 400-year period of time of no king on the throne in Jerusalem for the Jewish people.
What's his name?
Who's the first king?
The first Hasmonean king? Boy, isn't that a great question. I know this, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
What's his name?
It's easily found.
So it was Bob, his name was
Bob.
So it was a religious and a political fight.
Absolutely. If you read the books of Maccabees, it's absolutely religio-political. No question whatsoever.
I mean, we give it all of its purity today, that it was strictly religious there against the Greeks, but there was more to it.
The first Hasmonean king is Simon Tassi and then John Hyrcanus. Hyrcanus is the one who's really well known. He's on the throne for like 20 years. So we talk about Hyrcanus a lot, and then there's Aristobulus, Alexander Jannaeus, and the Queen Salome. These are the main players. Okay, the Queen Salome is on the throne from 76 to 67, and then there's Hyrcanus II, Aristobulus II, Hyrcanus the second again, and Antigonus. And in the middle of that, under Hyrcanus II, after Salome Alexandria, that's when he invites Rome in. The Hasmoneans invite Rome in to help keep the peace. All right, so anyways, what we're looking at is, for the men of the Great Assembly being referred to here in the Mishnah, there's a sense that they existed from the time the Second Temple was built, but there's no records, there's no literature, there's no legal rulings. We don't have books of the Torah that come from the Second Temple period from the year 500 to the time of the Maccabees. There's no literature.
That surprises me.
Right.
So was it all destroyed?
Or it didn't exist. There's over 3.5 centuries of time where we know that we're living under Persian and then Greek Empire, and things are just moving along. The Second Temple's up there on the hill. People are bringing sacrifices. There are high priests. There's no king.
Or the Sadducees prevented the Pharisees from.
There are no Sadducees or Pharisees. It precedes either of those
What
identifications.
about Josephus?
That Josephus is after the time period that I'm talking about. Josephus talks about under Rome. What was it like under Rome? I don't know that the Zealots and Pharisees and Sadducees and these groups of people existed under Persia. I don't know that they existed under the Greek Empire. They may really be movements that develop in the first century after the Hasmoneans come to power, as alternatives to the Hasmoneans. Right? Because the Zealots, their whole point is to have military rebellion against Rome. So there'd be no way that group would exist before Rome's there, because the Hasmoneans wouldn't have tolerated them. We have Hasmoneans killing a bunch of people who are kind of rebels. We have Hasmoneans killing early rabbis. Queen Salome of Alexandria is sister or sister-in-law of Shimon ben Shetach. one of the founders of Rabbinic Judaism. I hold historically that we absolutely can say that the lineage that I'm about to read in Pirkei Avot is the early lineage of Rabbinic Judaism. This is the beginning of Rabbinic Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism does not see itself that way. It sees itself as the inheritor of the men of the Great Assembly. But even in the time of the Second Temple, there was a Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. And there were Pharisees, rabbis on the Sanhedrin, but it's not clear that the Sanhedrin was only made up of them. It may have been a mixed group. Okay, so Pirkei Avot. That's the history lesson. So the Hasmoneans come to the throne in the year 140, 135, before the Common Era. Rome gets invited in 66. So from 135 before the Common Era to 66, you have Jews on the throne again, and that's when the early rabbinic system starts to begin. So let me read the line. So I just said Moses received Torah from Sinai, gave it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, elders to the prophets, prophets to the men of the great assembly, meaning Ezra. And they said three things. Who said three things? The men of the great assembly, presumably, but with its complete... This one sentence took us from the year 1200 before the Common Era to the year 200 of the Common Era. 1,400 years has occurred in the first sentence of Pirkei Avot. So, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, or however you like to open your mythological histories, right? You connect yourself to some place and time, and then you talk about what you've received from that place and time, and that's really when you're starting. Sentence 2 is where it's you talking.
Okay, but maybe the Pirkei Avot wasn't talking about Anshe Knesset Gedola as an institution. It was just talking about the existing scholars, such as they were.
Then who are the ones who said, raise up many disciples and make a fence for the Torah?
Those guys.
Those guys, whoever they are, wherever they were. Yeah, okay. Once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away.
Well,
Those guys.
but it's the best explanation. In other words,
I don't
there
have
was
a-
no Anshe Knesset.
I don't have a problem. There was something called Anshe Beit Knesset Agdol. We don't know who they were or what they were really, how long they were running, what their authority was, whether it went up, whether it went down, and whether they had Torah learning and yeshivas and all the stuff that people project backwards. You don't know much. What we do know is that in verse 2, I've got Shimon ben Shetach, or Shimon HaTzadik. I've got Shimon HaTzadik was of the remnants of the Great Assembly, meaning he was the last of the men of the Great Assembly. He also becomes the first of the line of rabbis. So there's this connecting point where the founder of Rabbinic Judaism is Shimon HaTzadik. And what does he say? He says, Al shlosha davarim ha'olam omed, ala Torah, ala avodah, al gemilut chasadim. The world stands on three pillars: Torah, divine worship, and acts of loving kindness. And that's today still a foundational teaching of any rabbinic synagogue in the world. Those are the things that we do. We teach Torah, we engage in worship services, and we create a society of kindness. That is the foundational teaching of Rabbinic Judaism. Okay?
Sure.
All right. Now, then we get a line in Pirkei Avot. Antigonus, and I want you to look at the Mishnah you read and tell me if any of these people show up. Okay? Antigonus, a man from Socho, received from Shimon HaTzadik. And he used to say, Antigonus, do not be a servant who is serving the master in order to receive a reward. I'm reading from something you don't have. I'm reading from a different text. Do not be as servants who are serving the master in order to receive a reward. Rather, be like servants who serve their master not in order to receive a reward, and may the fear of heaven always be upon you. So in other words, why do you do the mitzvot of the Torah? Because if I don't, God will punish me. No. Because if I do, God will reward me. No.
Well, why do you say no to fear? I thought that was the...
And may you have fear of heaven upon you, which is Yirat Adonai. Always a sense, not that he'll punish me, just a general sense of, you know what, don't be so chutzpahdik in the world. You're not so big, God is bigger, God is real, God is present. You should be aware that God is always, always, always watching you. Therefore, you should do the right thing. Why should you do the right thing? Because it's the right thing to do. There's no other reason to do the right thing.
Oh, that's a stretch.
That's, well, okay, fine. So, but you're talking with Antigonus now. Antigonus of Socho learned from Shimon HaTzadik, and Antigonus of Socho said, when you do your things, do them because they're right. Don't do them for
Fear.
You should have some fear when you make your decisions to help you do the right thing, but when you do the right thing, don't expect a pat on the back. Don't look for a cookie, right? God, I have done everything right. How come you have treated me this way? Wrong thinking, right? You're not a dog looking for a biscuit. You're a human being.
Why
Do-
do bad things happen to good people?
Just do the right thing, right? Are bad things happening? Okay, so what are you going to do? How about the right thing? Are good things happening? Great. What are you going to do? How about the right thing? Right? That's what he's saying. Just do the right thing because it's the right thing. Right? Let's get all the reward and punishment and stuff, heaven and all that stuff. Let's get that out of the religion at the base level of making your own decisions. Just do them because of the right thing. Now, Yossi ben Yoetzer,
All right.
recognize him?
Yes.
The man of Tzreda, and Yossi ben Yochanan,
Yeah, he's one too.
okay, a man of Jerusalem, received from them. Who did they receive from? Antigonus and Shimon HaTzadik. So, now we have the first two of what are called zugot. These are study pairs. These are chavrutas. So if you're going to start the rabbinic system, and you're going to start a system that is based in Torah study, right, you need students. So that's why the first teaching from the men of the Great Assembly was, be deliberate in judgment, in other words, use Torah to make proper judgments, raise up many disciples, have students who will study the materials that you're teaching, and make a fence for the Torah, and protect Torah teaching so that people will observe them and not break them, and the Torah will be kept sacred and valued. That's the whole enterprise. And the world is based on Torah, divine worship, acts of loving kindness. Just do things because they're right, and now you get two guys, Yossi ben Yoetzer, Yosef ben Yochanan, and Yossi ben Yoetzer says, may your house be a meeting place for the sages, and you should become dirty in the dust of their feet and drink their words thirstily. And Yossi ben Yochanan, the man of Jerusalem, says, may your home be open wide, may the poor be members of your household, and do not increase too much conversation with a woman. Sorry, it's a different age. So they stated regarding his wife, all the more so with somebody else's wife. But the sages say, and you shouldn't talk to women because you go to hell. Fine. It's a different age. It doesn't apply today. But the concept was that women weren't engaged in the study house, so by going and frolicking with women and doing chit-chat, you would not be studying Torah. And what's happening here is that these two guys are saying you need to seek every opportunity, even impoverishment at the feet of the rabbis, who aren't rich and famous either, to learn Torah from them. This is how the rabbinic system started. Okay? All right, so there's those two guys. Who are the next guys in the Mishnah?
Joshua ben Pariah.
And
Nitai the Arbalite.
next two guys in Pirkei Avot. Yeshua ben Brachia and Nitai of Arbel received from them. Yeshua ben Brachia taught, make for yourself a teacher and acquire for yourself a study partner and judge every person on the side of meritoriousness, like give them a benefit of the doubt. And Nitai of Arbel said, distance yourself from a bad neighbor and do not befriend an evildoer and do not despair of punishment. So you have these, so again, you have two guys who learned from two guys. Who are the next guys?
Simeon ben Shittai and Shemaiah.
Okay, so in the line from Pirkei Avot, we have other names. Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach received from them. Yehuda ben Tabai said, don't make yourself like a judge's advisors, that when the litigants are before you, they should be like evildoers in your eyes, and when they excuse from you, they should be meritorious in your eyes, when they have accepted judgment. So what you should do as a judge is suspect everybody who is testifying in front of you in court, and when you see them on the street, presume that they are all good people. And that's how a judge should behave. So these are really, it's the rabbinic study system seeing themselves as being judges in a court. That's how that's who the first rabbis were. They were learning Torah law to be judges in a court. All of these cases are very clear that they're kind of in the context of being judges. So Shimon ben Shetach, who we had, says, examine the witnesses thoroughly, but be careful with your words, lest from them they learn to lie. So don't lead the witness. Right? Don't tip your hand what you're looking for, because they're going to try and please you, and then they'll lie, and lying is bad because they took an oath with God's name, and if they lie with an oath with God's name, death penalty. Right? So don't do that. So you have to be really careful as a judge. You need to know Torah really, really well, and you need to be really circumspect. Then Shemaiah and Avtalion received from them, and Shemaiah said, love work, hate power, and do not become too familiar with the government. Just keep your head down and do your job. Don't try and be so much. Avtalion said, sages, be careful with your words, lest you become obligated in the obligation of exile and are exiled to a place of evil waters, and the students who follow after you will drink, and thus the name of heaven is profaned. Sages, be careful, don't tick off the government, because if the government sends you into exile, your students will follow you, and everybody will be out there in the middle of nowhere, and Torah will be destroyed. And then after Avtalion and Shemaiah are Hillel and Shammai. No mention of Menachem, which is interesting. So Hillel and Shammai received from them, and Hillel said, be of the disciples of Aharon, loving peace, pursuing peace, loving the creatures, and bringing them closer to Torah. And then you get a bunch of Hillel teachings and a bunch of Shammai teachings. Okay, and then after that, Gamliel and Shimon ben Gamliel and so forth. All right, I do all this to show you that the Mishnah, as a document written in the year 200, is tapping itself into a long history. It believes it is a legacy of unbroken chain of tradition, going back to the same chain of tradition as Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is a chain of tradition to Sinai. So even here in Chagiga, when it talks about, when you read this Mishnah, it's like, hey, this guy said put the hands on, this guy said don't, this guy said do, 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 this other guy agreed, but he didn't keep his job for very long until someone else came in who said don't. Right? It's not a very meaningful Mishnah. Who cares? It's really a who cares Mishnah, except for the fact that it's showing you a dynamic play back and forth of opposites in the chain that founded Rabbinic Judaism. Right? These are not random names of people. These are the study pairs for the first 7 generations. Yosef and Yosef are 1. Yehuda ben Prachi and Nitai are 2. Tabai and Yehuda are 3. Shimon and Shemaiah are 4. Shimon is 4 without a partner. Shemaiah and Avtalion is 5. Hillel and Menachem is 6. Hillel and Shammai is 7. So you have 7 generations of dynamic debate, dynamic argumentation going on. You know the joke, what's the only thing 2 Jews can agree on?
Nothing.
The dues of a third. A third member of the synagogue's dues. Right? Or the thing, the guy who's on the island, right? And he builds 2 synagogues, and they rescue him. They say, why do you have 2 synagogues? This is the one I go to, that's the one I would never be caught dead in. Right? The concept is that, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. This is endemic to ourselves. We like to argue and debate and explore, and we don't like to be told it has to be this way. Right? Especially in matters of belief and theology and God, where really, how can you know what God wants? God is so much different from us. What human being can really summarize and explain God and know that they're right? That would be a very frightening person, right? Or delusional. Because what's between my left ear and my right ear is not big enough to encompass and understand all that is God, let alone have the words to explain it. I think we know a lot, but it's barely a drop of what God is. So what's happening here is you are given a system that has dynamic dispute and disagreement from the beginning of Rabbinic Judaism. I believe that Yosef and Yoetzer and Yosef and Yochanan, right, who are inheriting from Shimon HaTzadik and Antigonus of Socho, are the first generation of rabbis. Shimon HaTzadik and Antigonus of Socho have students. That's where Rabbinic Judaism begins. You have Judaism before them. You have Torah, you have mitzvahs, you have law, you have people doing sacrifices, you have all the things we do, observing the holidays. Judaism is older than this. But the particular form of Judaism that is centered by rabbinic study of the Torah, that begins with these guys in Pirkei Avot. And this Mishnah is now saying that this has been the dynamic all along. And the halacha was this way, and then now they're going to go in the Gemara, they're going to say that this guy was the one in charge, then that guy was the one in charge. And they're going to try and debate whether or not the practice in the temple actually was flip-flopping over and over and over again, and then they're going to determine that there's a way to solve that. Okay?
So the Mishnah is really composed of all these arguments and suits that are brought before
The Mishnah
rabbis.
is usually, this is what's interesting about this particular quote, the Mishnah usually does not give this many differences. The Mishnah usually says, here's the halacha, so-and-so said that, but the rabbis said this. And then you can determine that who won the argument by how it's been presented.
And then the Gemara is supposed to explain. the
Exactly,
Mishnah.
correct. Exactly right. The Gemara is the study line by line of the Mishnah. Okay, so that's as Forrest Gump would say, about all I have to say about that. The first of these was the Nasi. So the solution now in the Mishnah is going to be, in each of these pairs, the first was the Nasi of the court, and the second was the Av Beit Din. So that means that when you had Yosef ben Yoetzar and Yoshua ben Prachia and Yehuda ben Tabai, the first of each, they would have done Smicha on Yom Tov, together with Shemaiah and Hillel, who permit it. They were all Nisi'im of their respective courts. Shemaiah was Nasi. The Mishnah lists his opinion permitting Smicha first, even though in a bunch of different places, 3 previous groupings, it listed the opinion of the prohibiting person first. You see the flip back and forth. But an Av Beit Din is different. The Av Beit Din is the head of the court, and they served as leaders of the Sanhedrin according to most rabbinic interpretation. So you have a difference between the Av Beit Din of a court and the person who's the head of the Sanhedrin as a whole. So then they're going to get into details in the Gemara about how to do these sacrifices in different ways. Okay? So that's just interesting. I don't want to go into the Gemara because we are going to take a break until like October 6th or something. Because next week I'm in a conference, then 2 weeks I'm on vacation, and then it's Monday Labor Day, and then it's Monday Rosh Hashanah, and then it's Monday before Yom Kippur, and then it's Monday Sukkot, and then it's Monday Simchas Torah, and then it's October 6th. So, right. Or October, not 6th. Let me get the right date. October 8th, which is Columbus Day, but we're going to, Columbus Day. In honor of discoveries of new worlds, we will explore the Talmudic world together. Okay. So we're going to pick up on that day. I would like to suggest a change of tractates. Because I looked ahead.
Good.
And I think maybe this group has been more interested in some of the world of like ideals and ideas, and this question of heresy is unresolved in some ways. There is another tractate, another Mishnah, that tackles this topic in a different way, and that's chapter 10 of tractate Sanhedrin, which is referred to as Chelik. Chelik is from the Mishnah that says, Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelik ba'olam haba. All Israel has a place in the world to come. And then it quotes Isaiah and says why. And then it says, Chutz meh, except for, and it names a bunch of bad guys from the Torah.
The other.
Right, who's going to resonate with the idea of Acher.
We did that here.
We mentioned it, but we haven't done it. So I'm recommending that we do that Mishnah and the Gemara, because the Gemara goes into who all the people were who are so bad they don't get in and why. Right?
Which Baba is that?
What's that?
Which Baba is that? Baba?
It's not one of the Bubbas.
It's not?
It's a different tractate called Sanhedrin.
Oh, it's
There
not.
are 60 tractates,
Baba
only
Metzia,
3 of them.
Baba Kama.
Baba is only one of them in 3 parts. Baba Metzia, Baba Kama, Baba Batra. Right? Which Bava means gate, Kama means first, Mitzia means second or middle, and Batra means last or third. So
So this is not any of the Babas.
not a Baba. It's not a Baba Maisa. Yes.
Where, is that a Mishnah, Pirkei Avot, and which one is it?
Pirkei Avot is Mishnah, and the book of Mishnah is called Avot.
Avot, okay, so.
Avot is the name of one of the books of the Mishnah.
Okay, so that's
And
one of the
this
six.
is what we're gonna
It's
do
called
Sanhedrin.
Avot. And we just did Sanhedrin and Chagim, so that's three.
Right. So there are 6 orders of the Mishnah. Okay. The orders of the Mishnah are Zera'im, which is agricultural law, and in no particular order. Nizikin, which is tort law or secular property law. Nashim, laws of women. Moed, laws of holidays and sacred times. I knew I'd get myself in trouble.
It's Chagim, Moed?
What's that?
Is Chagim within Moed?
Chagiga is in Moed.
In Moed, okay.
Bava Metzia is in Nizikin, the section of damages. Okay? Sanhedrin is also in Nizikin, the section on laws and courts. Sanhedrin.
This is from Sanhedrin.
What we will be doing beginning in October is from Sanhedrin.
And it's Chelek.
And it's the chapter 10, which begins with a Mishnah called Chelek. Yes.
Does this class, I mean, you're talking about these dates and times, do you ever in this class, like, bring it up to modern times where you can relate from that till?
I understand what you're asking for.
Yeah.
This particular class tends to just take the Talmud on its own terms as we go, and then we come up with our own feelings about it that we kind of share and apply and gain insights. But it's not going to be like, it's not going to help us understand the holiday of Sukkot, or what Rosh Hashanah means, or what does it mean to keep kosher. Like that level of the meaning of Judaism, this Talmud class is not really going to provide.
But what does it do that I could relate to, being as unreligious as I am, but curious? Would it do, like, you know?
I understand what you.
I'm a very honest person.
No, I understand.
Put it out there, because-
I'm choking on the word unreligious because I don't like the word religious in that sense. But I know what you mean. I think you're saying someone who doesn't have a strong background or lifestyle in these matters, and you're really just flirting with it for a lot of the first ways, first times kind of stuff. Talmud is not usually where people start, but you could enjoy the class. So I would, come and see if you enjoy it.
It's more history than.
This was history because that's what came up. But on another day, something else will come up.
And it would, and then it would kind of relate to today.
Maybe sort of, kind of. It's not its goal.
I guess I have to give it another shot to see.
The classes that you might better enjoy on Sunday mornings, there's a course called Melton, and people enroll in Melton, and that is where the Melton classes on Sunday
Can
morning.
you spell that again?
Melton. And those tend to be more like Judaism for meaning.
Sunday morning, and so,
They start after the holidays, again, October 7th.
okay.
And there's, from 10 to 11, there's a course this year on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And then from 11 to 12, there's a course that's from the book of Bamidbar, studying Torah for meaning.
Oh, so
11 to 12.
12 would be more what I,
Mm-hmm.
October 7th, 11th to 12th. Say
I
that
wish
again,
it
what
would-
class?
Melton.
No, what it's studying.
I spoke wrong. He's Vayikra. It's lessons from the book of Leviticus, I think. But I can give you the contact person to get a hold of regarding that.
Yeah, that
I
would be
wish you
good.
would publish the whole history